I'm here today with Carolyn McKnight, the Executive Director of Impact Entrepreneurs here at Portland State University, our Director of Leadership in the MBA programs, and an MBA coach, and dear colleague and friend. I've asked Carolyn to come today to talk about leadership purpose. That's a big part of the goal in our organizational behavior class, and Carolyn is my mentor for seeking leadership purpose. She has a vast experience in industry before she came to the university, and she's led a lot of us into thinking more carefully and deeply about our purpose in business. So Carolyn, I wanted to ask first, what is leadership purpose?
First, thanks, Jeannie, and it's good to be with all of you students. One way of answering that, Jeannie, Warren Bennis, the great management thinker, said something like, this is my paraphrase, becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. And I think that the most significant thing in a true leadership purpose is authenticity. And my view is that leadership is always autobiographical. It's a personal narrative, and we don't find a leadership style or purpose outside, we find it inside. And so that's, to me, the most important thing. What is my reason for being? What, if my life had purpose, what would it be? Mm-hmm. Would be another way of asking that question, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. And it helps to ask it different ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. How does one begin to determine their leadership purpose? How does the journey start?
Mm-hmm. My own experience and what I found helpful with clients or students is to really look at that autobiographical piece. What's the root of my life? The foundation is so important. Roots, it's in the nature of an acorn to become an oak. It can't be other than that. And so to look at the patterns and to find what gives meaning. So doing something that is life-serving, life-giving, that's energizing rather than debilitating certainly is one way to start, and to look at what that is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, it was my case for a while, I was resisting what my purpose came to be, because it was more kind of a family story and something I wasn't particularly interested in living out. But then, of course, we follow that, which is within us to do. So I think that the most important thing is to look at the patterns. What inspires us? What energizes us? And the hope is that the closer we get to that material, that's the real work. And that's the autobiographical nature of it.
Well, there are a lot of pressures. I think our students feel inordinate pressure to achieve, to make a living. I just wonder how, you mentioned sort of having constraints around getting to your real leadership purpose in years past. Do you have any advice for students who may struggle against a context that isn't really letting their acorn become an oak, or that's conflicting with their purpose?
The acorn will become an oak. So the conflict is when we're trying to become something else, and it becomes less authentic. So again, it's really digging more deeply into what is ultimately satisfying and not trying to live someone else's story. For instance, many times we run our lives first seeking to please parents, and then to please teachers, to please friends, to please partners, spouses, to please bosses, without ever asking what gives us the deeper pleasure that we're really seeking in our own lives. Now, it's possible that one's purpose is to please others. That could be a legitimate purpose for some. But my experience is that when we're the object of other people's desires for us, rather than the subject of our own desires, really knowing what we want, for the sake of what do we really deeply care about, then that becomes conflicted in nature. And we're seeking to kind of please others when in fact we're not going with our heart. So it's an act of courage. One of the things we say about leadership is it's a process of vulnerability and intimacy, and to really live in a heart-forward way. with courage to take a stand for what we care about and what we really most deeply want.
Mm-hmm.
Not easily done.
No. And that kind of gets to my next question. You foreshadowed it beautifully, and that is, how does identifying one's purpose more deeply influence their behavior?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a question. Is it true that life on purpose has more meaning than life by accident?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it true that if I have a North Star, if I have a direction, that I am more likely to achieve that?
Mm-hmm.
I can make course corrections. And so I think a purpose can deeply ground us
Mm-hmm.
and give meaning and direction to our behavior. When they're in conflict is when we need to make some adjustments. So many times, and in my own life, I say I have this purpose, but I behave in another way. And so that's an opportunity for me to practice
Mm-hmm.
the behavior that I want. And first I need to become aware that I'm missing the mark. And so does my daily behavior match what I say I want in my life? And if not, am I able to make the correction? A lot of this is rooted in emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So self-awareness of purpose, and then social awareness of how other people experience me.
Mm-hmm.
What's my presence? Am I aware of how other people experience me?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's in conflict with my purpose, then am I able to self-regulate to make an adjustment?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big challenge, which is why as adults we practice a practice plan to really have the behavior that we want.
Mm-hmm. And those practices can come in the forms of reflective writing, meditation, checking in with those around you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of other examples of behaviors that can help get
Mm-hmm.
people closer to?
Yeah. So I encourage myself and all of us, if we're practicing, to have three elements. First, a reflective practice, to check in a couple of times a day around the content that we're seeking to review. And rather than just sliding past it, to really reflect on what we're noticing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first step, not changing something, just noticing. And so it has an element of reflection, and you could set an intention to notice at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, do reflective writing, but there's a reflective piece. Secondly, some somatic practice, some physical body-based practice. It could be daily exercise, it could be yoga, tai chi, qigong, aikido. It could be just noticing, as in the reflective practice, what's going on in the body, but to have an element of practice around physical sensation. Again, leadership is always embodied.
Mm-hmm.
So without the body vehicle, there's not much leadership that goes on. So to pay attention not just to the reflective piece, but to the somatic piece. And then lastly, to have a specific content intention. So it might be around presentation skills.
Mm-hmm.
If the practice was to be more comfortable making a presentation, then reflect, before a presentation, the intention, a reflective practice around that. Before and after, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
And then to also take time to notice in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe take time to exercise more completely if it's right,
Mm-hmm.
the day of a presentation. Many ways that could be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I recently read some research about stance and posture and
Mm-hmm.
attitude, and the ability to practice the embodiment of power and confidence through moving your arms in certain ways in advance of a presentation makes a difference. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to connect the somatic activity with the cognitive and behavioral stuff.
Right.
So you have talked to MBA students for many years about their leadership purpose. You also have a practice of your own, a consulting practice where you help people, and
Mm-hmm.
You've been a friend and colleague to many, including me, and helped us with our purpose. I'm just curious, for our students, it might be interesting to hear some examples of purpose statements, or not betraying a confidence, but I think it would be useful.
Mm-hmm. I work with an executive currently whose purpose, sometimes they come in the form of a tagline, sometimes in the form of a longer sentence. He says, work hard, give back, have fun. And that's autobiographical for him. He really inherited that from his father, who was a great model. The work hard, I can see it in his everyday life. The give back, he's involved in on many boards with his church, with his community. He definitely practices that, give back. It's a leadership imperative for him. And he also has a very balanced life, this notion of having fun. So I've heard him say that a number of times. Asked him if I could use it. He said yes, so thank you for the question. Yeah. He said, work hard, give back, have fun. One of the things that I work on is the field of social enterprise. So I work with social entrepreneurs around the world, largely in developing countries. And in Cambodia, we have an initiative working with an organization that seeks to employ rural poor, polio, landmine victims, trafficked or abused women. And one young woman with whom I worked, who happens to be a victim of polio, has crutches that she uses. And when she delivered her leadership purpose statement, she said simply, my purpose is to live an independent life, to show others what's possible. So again, autobiographical. That could never have been my purpose. It wouldn't have come to me, but that's very in a deep way, her purpose, to live an independent life, to show others what's possible. One other one comes to mind, just as you asked the question. Work with a local entrepreneur who's really hard-charging, quite aggressive, and he sent me by email a purpose statement. It said, I am a drop of water, flowing peacefully, reflecting light, showing love. At which point I stopped reading and said, what happened to this guy I know, who's this hard-charging entrepreneur? The last phrase was, carving deep canyons out of granite. I'm a drop of water, flowing peacefully, reflecting light, showing love, carving deep canyons out of granite. The point was he acknowledged he was a drop of water, but his intention was to flow peacefully and to have love and kindness, a sense of ease with those around him. And that he knew that as that, he would be able to make amazing things happen in the world. Interestingly, back to how this sense of purpose can help us, the next time I heard from him, he called to have lunch and report that he had sold the company and was launching a new business. And it was because he had really come to see that he was not flowing peacefully. He was not reflecting light nor showing love, and he needed to make a change. So I think that if we can select a purpose and stay connected to it, it can really be a North Star for us and keep us on track. Those are some that come to mind.
Those are great, and they remind me that much like a mission statement of an organization, really well articulated, deeply felt purpose can help people know what to say no to as a leader, and as a person, what not to do, as well as what to embrace. And yeah. All right. And so, what is the dark side? Because we sat in such a lovely place. So the dark side. What gets in the way? We talked about this a little bit, but what gets in the way of people determining their purpose, or what are some of the classic obstacles to really one's journey in defining their purpose?
My own experience is that, as with most things, it's fear. That if I state a purpose, I might not achieve it. It might be the wrong one. Just coming to understand and accept, place a foot firmly someplace and move in that direction and make course corrections. Because that's how we discover it. Not only does clarity lead to action, but action leads to clarity. And so just stepping in, and often there's an element of resistance or fear that certainly takes me off of my purpose and keeps me from really fully committing in a heart-forward way to what I want to create. So I think it's wishing to please other people, not acknowledging to myself what I really want or what I'm being asked to do from life itself. And so it's an invitation to just know oneself better which I think is why Warren Bennis said becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming oneself. It is the deepest way of understanding what drives us and what we're committed to and how to support each other. So my purpose statement in short form is more happiness, less suffering. And it took me quite a while to see that and accept it. But it's really been enormously supportive for me to keep my mind focused on that, to help reduce suffering in my own life as a way of doing that for other people.
That's great. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Great, thanks for the questions.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Good.